Hello, everyone. Welcome to a... Oh, I just realized I didn't have my ring light on. There we go. Now I'm better lit. Okay, hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Eventide patron-only stream. How is everyone doing here this fine evening? I want to start off by, frankly, just kind of apologizing. My last couple weeks, I have been utterly swamped. The end of this year has turned into a complete mess for me, and I'm only now just starting to see the end of it. So, a little bit of backstory here, just so that you understand what's going on. Production cycles, you got to make things, and the things we're making for next year, well, they get made now because they need to go to the printer, they need to get shipped back, and they need to be ready in time for the summer convention season. And, well, suffice to say, that means all of our major deadlines are like right now. So, we got some big things coming out next summer. That I'm sure you've heard plenty about. I'm not really going to discuss those things here, but those things are moving through my department right now. And as a result, I am, quite busy trying to stay atop multiple major products that are finishing up their path through design and going into layout and editing and all that sort of stuff. They're not even going to the printer yet, but our phase on them needs to end so that the other teams can wrap those things up. So what does that mean? Well, it means I've been doing a lot of overtime. I've been pulling 60-hour weeks for the past 3 weeks. And I've been, frankly, exhausted and tired. And last week, it knocked me out. I had a really bad time on Tuesday. I did not get a lot of sleep. So I just didn't stream at all. And to be honest with you all, I'm not 100% here today either, but I'm doing a bit better. So anyway... that's what's been going on with me. Eventide has been a thing I've picked at over the past several weeks. It just hasn't not been able to be my primary focus. As you probably saw, I did get the orc version of the Gloamling out to all of you, so you all should have that at the very least. And I can tell you that I am making some progress on the revision to the Penumbrist. But again, everything's taking a back burner to the overtime I'm having to do. So it's kind of unfortunate. Not really where I want to be on this sort of stuff, but it is where I'm at. So, there's that. Now, tonight, what I'd like to do is talk about a different thing that I've slowly started picking at, right? So, the remaster for Pathfinder is here. And we kind of talked about how the remaster is going to affect a bunch of things, mostly in small ways, right? I don't have giant things in the setting based on alignment. I didn't really have a lot built on the 8 schools of magic, right? I touched on these things. There were places where they kind of got used a bit, but ultimately... they weren't a focus for me. So, or an Eventide. And that wasn't, by design. It wasn't like I saw this coming. It's just happy coincidence. So, a bunch of those changes, we kind of went over those. But what we didn't go over was any of the new opportunities. Now, there's not a lot of this stuff, because remember, the remaster really doesn't change Pathfinder 2e that much. The numbers, math isn't changing. The way you read a monster stat block really doesn't change. The way a combat encounter goes, the way that you do combat, most of that stuff is exactly the same. So there isn't a lot of kind of brand new things to play with, except one. So as I mentioned, the schools of magic, the traditional 8 schools of magic from the OGL, abjuration, conjuration, transmutation, evocation, necromancy, illusion, divination, yada yada yada. I think that was all of them. I might have missed one. Anyway, illusion. The 8 schools of magic went away, and those were a key component of the wizard, right? Because you could be a specialist wizard, and basically they were the only class that cared about that bit of cruft, really. There were a few other corner cases in the game engine where the school of magic was important, but frankly, pretty minor. Like, there were some monsters that played with certain schools differently, and there were some feats that did some stuff. But, sorry. Something. But with those going away, that class feature of the wizard no longer worked. You could no longer get your bonus spell. You no longer knew what those bonus spells were because we stripped all those schools out. But the remaster, I actually remember the specific meeting when we came up with this idea that we were like, well, it's an arcane school, so why don't we just make it your arcane school? Like, it can have the exact same feature and function and just be the actual place where you went to school. And frankly, although a lot of people aren't thrilled with this, it's a bit more of a balanced thing. Because it's a limited list. Each school, the way these schools work, is they pretty much work like the way that Arcane School class feature worked before. They give you a list of spells that says, here's all the spells. You learn these automatically. They were taught to you by your school. And here are some focus spells. You know, special things that were taught by your school that you can use more frequently. And these new arcane schools work exactly the same way. It's just that instead of giving you a, spell school, which is an infinitely ever-growing list of spells that you can, learn. You still have to learn them. But once you learn them, you can cast any one of them, once per day. Or prepare one of them. You get a free slot with one of them. It's infinitely flexible. To here is a list of spells that were taught by your school, and it's customizable. The GM can be like, oh yeah, no, your school taught you these extra spells. We don't really care if you add a handful of spells to the schools that kind of tie it into your world, or your story or your setting or whatever, or your character. But they have to now fit within a theme. So this is an area, one of the few areas that the remaster actually opened up kind of new design space. The one thing we couldn't really do in second edition was create new arcane schools. The closest we ever got was like doing elementalism, right? Where it's like, oh, fire. You could be a fire as your arcane school, or earth, right? We did some elemental stuff. But frankly, that was it. Like, there wasn't any place else to go because there was no way to classify spells in a different way. So this change means that I have to go back to Eventide and decide what my arcane schools are going to be. So I've already started this work. I want to kind of walk through some of the ideas that I've got floating around. If folks have any more ideas, I will take those ideas and keep them under consideration. The sky's kind of limit here. Caveat, as with all of the brainstorm chats that we have, if you contributed an idea here willingly, you are basically giving me rights to use it. Royalty free forever. So if you don't like that, don't give me ideas in this venue. So I have a number of schools that I've kind of already thought of, and some of them are actually even listed in some of my documentation. But I now need more. And so this is the conflict. The conflict here is that magic is dying in Eventide. It's not going well. That's part of the central story of the game. But I'm still going to need wizard schools for players to pick. That way they can make interesting characters. So on one hand, I have to be like, yes, magic is dying. It's going away. There's not a lot of magic. On the other hand, I have to be like, well, the player characters are the exception, right? That's one of the rules, kind of baked into the settings assumption, is that the player characters are the special ones. There are other characters in the world that do have magic and do have access to magic, but the players are the ones that generally speaking work at the Pathfinder baseline. They have spells, they have magic items, they have that sort of stuff. Whereas the average person, they don't have that stuff. They don't have magic items. They have alchemical items. Those are much more common. They don't have magic items. So spells are kind of interesting, especially arcane spells, because part of the history of the world, and let me go, there's a bit here from the player's guide. I'm just going to read it. Um, if you remember the lore of the setting, there was a... All right, so you got the very beginnings of the continent, the age of magic, which is when elves and dwarves kind of ruled the continent and did what they want to do. And after that, the elves and the dwarves went to war with each other in a period called the Kin Wars. That then led up, went for several centuries before peace was finally founded, and humans arrived, and the place started to stabilize, and then Eventide hit. And during Eventide, there was weeks of darkness, and coming out of that, things were different. The elven birth rate dropped through the floor. They stopped being able to conceive. Dwarves started going back under the earth, never to return. And over the next 4 centuries, everything kind of changes. The elves and the dwarves lose their grip on the continent of Ulnir, and in that period of time, the kingdom of Zankar renames itself the Zankar Imperium. And they start taking over the continent. And at one point in time, this is around 1034 TD, that's the current year reckoning. So this is 800 years after Eventide, a little less. By 1034, the Zankar Imperium spread had started to reach across Ulnir. So when they closed all remaining arcane institutions within their borders, confiscating all their books and research, it was a great loss to what was left of the magical world. Fortunately, many academies saw this coming, smuggling many of their most valuable tomes and papers out of the Imperium. Many found their way to the Pale Ivy College in Varnathus, the Understudy in Crownbog, and the Soaring Library on the cliffs of Delmasson. Rumor holds that the confiscated tomes were taken to the Great Library of Grogassa for safekeeping under the Emperor's watchful eye. So, that right there gives me my place to start, because we know that magical learning, especially arcane learning, was smuggled out of Zankar when Zankar outlawed it, what was left of it. And so we got 3 things right there. There were 3 name drops, so that's where we start. So we got the Pale Ivy College in Varnathus, the Understudy in Crownbog, and the Soaring Library in Delmasson. So let's talk about each one of these and what I'm envisioning for their arcane school. And how they're reacting and existing today. So the most important one to my setting is the Pale Ivy College in Varnathus. So Varnathus is the port town on the western end of the valley that leads to Wormbone, right? So it's not actually in the Icescar Valley. Let's see, do I have my map in here? No idea. I think I do. It's got to be in here somewhere. Ah, there it is. So here's the Icescar Valley. Varnathus is not on this map. It's to the west. So it's off this map to the west. So the Pale Ivy College is where Wolfram went to study magic. And the Pale Ivy College is... in the middle of Varnathus. Varnathus is this port town that sits atop natural steam vents and hot springs. So, despite its very northerly location, it stays pretty warm through what is otherwise a bitterly cold winter for most of the rest of the region. And the Pale Ivy College sits atop a massive steamworks. That's part of the school. So one thing that I'm envisioning for this school in particular is, frankly, your pretty classic wizard school, right? I think this place, out of all the places that are possible here, the Pale Ivy College is the one that is typical. Is what you, when you say wizard school, there are certainly many images that come to mind. I won't drop any names because some of them are pretty tarnished these days. But the cliche and the tropes are still there. You've got, kids learning magic and going to various courses in a sprawling campus grounds. This one happens to be located atop a steamworks. So I think that when it comes to this school, I think this school is the kind of run-of-the-mill wizard school. Almost typical in its nature. And when I look at the schools, so there are some schools in the core, right? But most of them are kind of... they're a little bit all over the place. I do like this school may be close to the School of Civic Wizardry, actually, in terms of its theme. But I'd probably go more kind of center line generic. So, you're going to get your ability to fly. You're going to get a fly spell. You're going to get teleportation. Actually, you might not get teleportation. That doesn't work very well in this setting. But you're going to get fly. You're going to get fireball. You're going to get, force barrage. But in addition, I do think, and Alara, you clued right in on it there. There is some kind of mage punky, steam punky stuff going on here. So I think the school spells for this are kind of fun. I think its lowest level spell is some sort of steam geyser, right, or steam blast that is taught by the school, and then the higher level version might be something different, right? But I think the low level version is definitely some sort of offensive steam blast spell that shoots hot steam at people. Just fun stuff. I think that's a lot of fun. But I think that's probably what the Pale College is. Pale Ivy College is the easiest for me to figure out. I think that's the one that'll come together the most quickly. So there's that one. Let's move on. Because I want to get through these base ones, and then I want to talk about some other ones that I'm thinking about. Because I want about 6 or so. That's my current thought, is that I want about 6-ish. Less than that, and it feels like you don't have enough choices. More than that, and it makes magic seem too present, I guess. Can high-level wizards make golems? No. So the next one on the list that was mentioned in the Eventide Player's Guide is the Understudy in Crownbog. Now, this place, I don't have any information on it other than its name drop right there. But I will tell you what I always imagined on it, which is it's called the Understudy because it's underground. It is underground where the magics that they are working with and experimenting with can be kept safe and not tear through the city. I think this is because it's Crownbog. So Crownbog is the capital of or really the only major city in the nation state that is the kind of goblin area. It is a city that is built up out of the swamp and has famously burned or fallen down several times and has been rebuilt. This school, I think, because it's probably run by goblins, is pretty goblin themed. So I think to that end, the thing that I think might be most fun for this school is that it focuses on flashy magic, dangerous stuff, like shape changing and explosive stuff, and probably also has a big study in alchemy as not for wizards necessarily, but as a appended study. There's a lot of alchemists that probably go to the understudy as well. But yeah, I definitely think that the understudy is where they study the dangerous stuff. But dangerous in a predictable way. Not sinister. Not oh yeah, no, they're messing around with planar stuff, or I've got another idea for that. But I think more just they're willing to do battle magic and physics stuff and I do think shape changing and form transmutation are a big thing. Polymorphing, right, is a big thing, probably in understudy. But I think with all of these, I do also have the chance of having ancient lore and ancient knowledge hidden away in them, because this is where a lot of those books end up. Okay. Underground magic duels. I kind of like that. Maybe there's a magic dueling league. Right? Where wizards from all around come and harness power from land and then duel. No, wait, no. I think this has been done. All right, anyway. Dumb joke. So dumb. Okay. So the third thing that was mentioned was the soaring library on the cliffs of Dalmassan. So Dalmassan is outside of Zenkar. It's on the southern it's on the southern coast of Alnir. And it is located kind of in a very narrow strip of land between the mountains and the sea. No political commentary intended there. That is on a cliff side, right? So this entire city is kind of built on, frankly, land that is far from flat. It is very cliff-like, and the soaring library is up there in the lofty peaks, right? I think this is the sort of place. Again, I don't know anything about this place. I know a little bit about Dalmassan. I know its location. I know it's outside Zenkar. I know it's kind of a fiercely independent little city-state, mostly because of the power wielded by the soaring library. And I think Dalmassan is the kind of place that's focused on, like, high-minded studying, like, learning protection magic, learning the fundamentals of magical power. Like, this is the sort of place that's doing the high analytical magic. And, you know, so probably focused on, you know, protections, and it's less about blowing stuff up and you know, not that they don't have access to that sort of stuff, but the school itself focuses on magical learning, detection, and yeah, probably things that give you, you know, high magical ability. More mountain or more cliff? I think the city itself is kind of cliffs leading into mountains. So it's kind of in that transitory area. I do think the soaring library isn't the sort of place that actually floats or anything like that, but I think it probably has very tall towers that are on the side, coming out of the sides of mountains, making them really high above the ground. So yeah, I think this is the kind of place where, yeah, you got classic tower wizards, right? You know, they live in towers and they protect their city and their people. But they're probably the sort that sit around and argue about theory a lot more than any of the others, right? Pale Ivy is about teaching kids and keeping magical tradition alive. Understudy is about kind of wild wheeling and dealing, pushing the edges of destructive magic. Soaring Library is your place where you go for high-minded magical study. Now, there's one other mention in there that in that document that says specifically, rumor holds that the confiscated tomes, so everything in Zenkar that was confiscated, that they didn't get to smuggle out, were taken to the Great Library of Grogassa for safekeeping under the Emperor's watchful eye. That tells me that there's probably a secret arcane school in Zenkar. I haven't designed one. I don't know what it is, but it's probably... I've only got it written in my notes as the Vault. It's the place where they took all of the tomes. Everything they confiscated went to the Vault. Anything they find goes to the Vault. So Grogassa is an old elven town that's in the middle of Zankar. Forest community, just kind of in the middle of nowhere. And many years ago, it was mostly abandoned, but not quite. And Zankar, when they expanded through that area, took it over. And this was before they kind of outlawed arcane magic. Shortly thereafter, they made the place basically illegal. You can't go to Grogassa without permission. So Grogassa is off limits. And nobody quite knows why. It's secretive. Now, what type of magic do they teach there? I don't know. I think this is the sort of place that maybe, secretive magic, spying magic, stealth, infiltration magic. It's definitely the place where you're going to go to learn invisibility and clairvoyance and stuff like that. Maybe shadow magic and other kind of darker studies. Maybe they do weird stuff there. I don't know. But yeah, exactly. So I don't want this to step on the Penumbrists' toes, because Penumbrists are a big thing in Zankar. That is the one kind of magical tradition that is fully embraced. There's even a elite kind of school that you can go to learn how to become a Penumbrist in Zankar, and if you're good enough, you can join the Grey Vanguard, which is their kind of special forces, powerful Penumbrists. But yeah, I think the Vault is definitely a place that I'm going to have to develop and grow. I think I need 2 more. And I think that I've got some obvious directions I can go. So one direction I could go is I could do something with the Halflings. One of the other major cities on Ulnir that is outside Zankar control, because remember, if it's inside Zankar, it doesn't have arcane magic. So, is the city of Belcrash. Now, Belcrash is a halfling nation state. It is basically a bunch of halfling refugees arrived here and set up a city, right? And it's called Belcrash because their main ship had a big bell on it, and the ship crashed here, and this is where they founded their community. So, I've got the halflings. Now, I could just put another magical academy in Belcrash, right? I mean, I could do something. It doesn't have to be halfling themed per se, but it is a thing I could do. That said, halflings originate from Helenanthus, a volcanic continent, very large. I think it's actually technically an island. But it is a very, very large island, but it's absolutely packed with halflings. And they're constantly sending boats of halflings to other places just to live, because there's no room on Helenanthus. Helenanthus is packed. So Belcrash has become one of their major cities. It's outside Zankar control. It's big enough and strong enough to kind of fend off Zankar because of its location. It's a little further away in a bay that kind of limits its growth, but also protects it. Because it's got mountains around it. So, I mean, I could just do that. And in Helenanthus, magic was never outlawed like it was in Zankar, right? So, I think Australia size, no, I think it's smaller than that. But not a lot smaller than that. Maybe half the size of Australia, roughly, in terms of world. I don't know. World map. I don't think I have a world map I can show you because it's too, frankly, rough. No, it's not on that map. Damn it. Okay, well, I'll have to check one of the other maps. I don't want to spend time looking for it right now. Okay, so I was thinking I could just put a magical academy there. It could be focused on, I was thinking it could be focused on travel and things that were valuable to merchants. And the big thing about the halflings is, they're big into trade. They're big merchants. They're just kind of, they're world travelers, and they have that halfling, wanderlust, and takes them to new places. And then it hit me. So here's my idea for this school. It's on a boat. It's on a boat, and maybe a handful of boats. But I think that's really fun. I like that as an idea. Travel, community protection, yeah. Convenience, yeah. So my first idea on this is that it's an arcane school that isn't set in any one location. It travels around and teaches people magic. That's what it does. You never learn a lot, but the halflings still embrace arcane secrets. And I love the idea of a school on a boat. And if you want to learn magic with them long term, you have to travel with them, which takes you around the world, makes you more worldly, and teaches you more about the world. So they would have language spells. They would have communication, trade, protection, the crafting kind of spells, stuff like that. Things to help on a boat. But the halflings are so big into living on the sea. They're big sailors as a people that this makes perfect sense for them. I like it a lot. So yeah, I think that is a great idea. So yeah, and I think it travels around, but it stops in Belcrash with some frequency. So I think that's really interesting. I really like the direction that is going intellectually and conceptually. So there's that. And then I want one more, and this is the one that is the most kind of loose. Is I was thinking about having like an elven school. So the elves are basically gone. They're not quite gone, right? There are still elves floating around, but as a megalith, as a giant culture, they're mostly gone. But I was thinking that there possibly could be kind of a secret elven school that still exists, and it's mostly informal at this point, right? It's a handful of practitioners still teaching kind of some of the old elven ways of magic, and teaching about types of magic that even no longer exist. Like this is the one that's kind of oddly secretive and hidden away. And I think this might also be the one school that has some focus on spells that most people avoid these days. Because they are still the ones keeping these traditions alive, because they used to be reliable. So this might be the school where you have summoning. This might be the school where you have stuff dealing with planar study and understanding, because a lot of that stuff is really hard to do nowadays. And some of it just doesn't work. So it's possible that this school focuses on that sort of material. Making it kind of a real odd one, and maybe not one that the players pick. Yeah, I think there is some stuff like that. Now, I can, of course, also create kind of looser associations. I'm trying to decide whether or not there needs to be some sort of arcane school in Wormbone or in the Icescar Valley. That's the kind of more interesting thing I need to think about. So if I look at the Icescar Valley map, you've got Wormbone there in the middle. You got as far as other communities go, though, right? You've got Red Thistle. You've got Endvale, which is a weird kind of elven cult. You got the Free Farms, which are a bunch of kind of backwoods superstitious folks. You got Anvil Stump, which is just basically a dwarven camp. So, you don't have a lot of big communities. So if I did want to put an arcane school actually in the region, it might almost just need to be its own standalone thing. So maybe this elven school does make sense here, that there are still some elves who live in this region, and maybe they keep this old tradition alive. That's possible. That's certainly possible. And of course, we have the Pale Ivy College in Varnathus, which is not nearby, but can serve as a... this is the school you went to. I'm currently torn as to whether or not it's actually a good idea to put an arcane school actually in the area, because then it becomes something that the player may feel required to interact with, or worse, may find ways to kind of abuse. Oh, well, I'm going to go back to my alma mater. I'm sure they're going to help us with X, Y, or Z. I don't kind of want magic to be that common in Wormbone itself. So I think the right answer is just to not bring it there. So, I mean, if that's the way it goes, it's like, oh, well, yeah, you could learn from this weird elven college, but they're going to teach you things that aren't really very good to cast. I think my only problem with that is that it feels like a trap. It's like, yes, pick this arcane school. It's not going to work real well, but you could pick it. And it's got things that aren't going to function all the time. Winter Wizards, yeah, no, that's an interesting thought. I think the Pale Ivy College is definitely going to have kind of elemental magic in their mix, as the kind of classic wizard school. I think that taking them, because not just doing like kid wizard school nonsense, but having some sort of focus in their magic, having it be elemental because it's cold all the time, but they're on steam vents, so it's warm all the time, and you know, you can use steam to generate electricity, and you know, there's all these things you can do with that. So having it as a school have an elemental focus means that you could be, you know, yeah, I went to the Pale Ivy College and I majored in cold. Right? That's what I majored in, cold spells. And to keep it interesting, I could actually break this out a little further and say, yeah, well, when you go to the Pale Ivy College, you have to declare a major, and you get a handful of spells that are taught to all students, but then you pick a major, and your major gives you certain spells. So you could be always a fire major. So, you know, I got, you know, breathe fire and searing ray and fireball and yada yada yada. So that could be fun, and a way to kind of provide more choices without having to provide more schools. So that might be the way to go, and then maybe each major provides you with a different focus spell for its higher level stuff. Understudy in Crownbog, you know, and maybe to be honest, maybe the answer I'm looking for is that each one of these schools possibly has different fields of study that allows me to only have a handful of schools, but still provide a dozen options for wizard characters. So it's not just what school did you go to, it's what did you study at that school. So if you go to Crownbog, you could focus on shapeshifting and shape-changing, or you could focus on destructive magic, you know, or you could focus on alchemy and then you're not a wizard at all, right? You know, oh, the other thing you learned, alchemy, because you're an alchemist, not a wizard. But then I get to something like the Soaring Library, and I'm like, well, maybe that one's just traditional. It's just like, this is what you learn at the Soaring Library. There's one choice. That's all you get, right? You learn what we teach you. You don't get to make choices. You're a dumb kid. So I think that could be interesting and fun, and I think that would play out well. The Vault is still kind of an open question to me, whether or not that's just like the Zankar's secretive, yeah, we still study arcane magic on the side because there's still something to be learned there, and we don't want to give up power, but we don't want to have it everywhere in the nation, so we outlawed it. It's illegal for you, but it's not illegal for us. In which case, then they're just using arcane magic to create spies. Which could be really interesting. Maybe all of their wizards are... Maybe all the Zankar wizards are just spies. So it's more about spycraft, right? I'm actually going to write that down. Which is interesting because this might mean that this is the one place where if you're playing a rogue, you can still get some of those magic feats. Maybe. Yeah. here. Yeah, I mean, you could... Yeah, yeah, you could have an offensive-defensive split in the Soaring Library. That there are some that are all about protecting, and there are others that you can be chosen to be one of their war mages. That could be interesting, but I would view that more as like, it's not about, you know, personal level war mage. It's about, oh yeah, no, you're filled with battlefield magic, stuff to change the battlefield itself, not just to blow up a monster, right? The Halfling School one, that's an interesting one. I don't know necessarily what direction to take that one. I do like, the only thing I know is that I love that it's on a boat. But spell-wise, I think we've got a good set for that. But I'm not sure if that needs to be split up a bunch of different ways. Same goes for the Ancient Elven College, although that might allow me to have the kind of Elven College still teach traditional Elven magic, some of which deals with, you know, as close as they can get to primal magic. And then there is another one, you know, there is a branch of that studies secretive Elven nonsense from a long time ago that you shouldn't be learning. And that allows you to be a part of it without having to make a choice that is frankly not good for your character. Yeah, I haven't really figured out. There's a question in chat about how Maguses fit into all of this. I haven't really, to be totally honest, I haven't really looked very closely at classes from the Advanced Player's Guide, although now those are now part of the core, so I'm going to have to reevaluate that, right? Between Player Core 1 and Player Core 2, all of those classes are now kind of in the core of the game, which means I am going to have to think about where investigators live, where oracles live. Oracles are really interesting because I think that they make more sense in Eventide than clerics. Clerics require contact with their deity and structured religion, and a lot of that doesn't make as much sense anymore. But oracles might still be around in slightly greater numbers, even though the magic they're using is less reliable and less common. But they also, you know, don't necessarily have a direct line of chat with their power, which clerics do. Magus, going beyond that to like Magus and Summoner and stuff. Summoner is not in Eventide. Summoner doesn't work in Eventide. But Magus would. I need to figure it out and figure out how it fits, but I'd still need to figure it out. And obviously, Gunslinger and Inventor work just fine. They're good additions for Eventide, so. I haven't quite figured out Kineticist yet. I'm still thinking about whether or not that works in the setting or not. So, yeah. I think that's kind of where I'm at. No, I think you know, looking at other, you know, clerics, as I've said, clerics are much harder to come by these days. You just don't see them as much, and there's only 5 deities that anyone ever venerates anymore. All the other deities are old and forgotten. So, which certainly still works in the game, although, you know, there are some spell choices that you can't have. You cannot be a primal witch. That doesn't work. So, being an occult witch still works great, but the other ones don't work as well. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. That's what I'm doing with Arcane Schools. I still need to flesh these out. Fortunately, fleshing these out is really just writing a description of what the school is, creating the spell lists, and then either using existing focus spells or creating new focus spells. I think most of these creating new focus spells should be pretty easy, right? So I'll probably do that and make that part of my next kind of player's guide build that I'm working on. So that's currently in my notes. That's currently what I'm up to. I think that about wraps up this discussion. I'll go ahead and save this note, make sure I don't lose it. There we go. All right, folks. Well, it's good to talk with you. I'm hoping, you know, I'm about to go on my kind of winter holiday where I take a couple weeks off every year. I will probably still do streams throughout that, although next week might be a little tricky. I may be unavailable next Tuesday. I'll have to see how the day goes. We're still kind of planning it out. So I may be out next Tuesday, but I do intend to continue streaming and doing stuff throughout the holidays. I'm hoping to clear a major freelance project off my plate through the winter holiday, which will allow me to turn all of my focus back to Eventide. I'm actually really kind of excited to get back to work on this. I just need to continue clearing some things off my plate. So thank you for being patient with me, everybody. You know, things are still moving along. They're just pretty slow right now. No Scotland for me this year. No, I don't have Scotland in the cards. I haven't been on a plane since 2019. Anyway, folks, that's all I have here tonight. I want to thank you all for watching. Thank you for being a patron. Thank you for your support. I am going to get back to doing more of this work, and I'm excited to do so here in the coming weeks and months. Thank you for sticking with me, folks. I will see you next time.